So getting back to how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
That's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's another Wednesday. It is another episode of the Mattriarchy. I am, as always, or usually, or whatever, your host, Matt Rhys. Today, we have You Lousy Kids, also known as the Hutch, Mike Hutchison. Mm-hmm. And we've got the Cartoonicus, who doesn't even have a real name.
Stay tuned.
It's crazy. Today, we are talking about two books. We're talking about Batman Annual 14 from 1990. And we are talking about, it's actually two separate volumes. I don't know if I don't think this is ever collected into a single trade, but Two-Face Year One, two-parter. Here's the story, folks. See, when I first started reading comic books, this was on the shelf, and I wasn't sure if I was going to start buying Batman, but this was sitting there, and look at that cover. It's Neil Adams. It's just dynamic as heck. It just like stares into your soul with the malevolence. Look at that. Holy crow. I thought so. So when I got out of my own, started making my own money, I went back to the long boxes and picked this one up because I neglected to actually grab it off the shelf back in the day. But this one here, I picked up when I was out in Lincoln, Nebraska this spring, and I was never even heard of it, and it was on a good sale, so I bought it and I read it, and I was instantly conflicted. So I said to myself, "This is a show." So that's what we're going to do. We're talking about the two stories. We think of them, blah 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 blah. And
you were conflicted about Two-Face. The irony.
I was conflicted about Two-Face. Yeah,
we have to choose between the two.
The two. Yeah.
Oh,
it's interesting. We flip a coin, I guess.
I guess we could. and I have to say, I'm particularly pleased with the title of today's show. It's a Two-Face face-to-face twofer.
Mm-hmm. Basically, these are alternating origins for year one of Harvey Dent Two-Face. And I, for those who don't know, the one that came out in the late 80s or 1990, that was a new origin, because originally he was far more, it had a lot more to do with the fact that he was very pretty, and then he lost that face on the one side, and it kind of it just snapped his personality. And with what they know about psychology in the 80s and 90s, they're trying to say, well, no, he always had a suppressed personality, and that was a new thing that they were introducing to Two-Face, because it wasn't just that he had a bad day and snapped, which is kind of the same thing as the Joker, that this was and I'm jumping ahead here, but the story in the 1991 is that he was an abused child, and his dad would use a two-sided coin and say that if it came up tails, he wouldn't get hit, but it never comes up tails because it's a two-headed coin. So yeah, and so he was always facing this coin decision. That there's a lot more to it. But that's basically this new thing that was introduced in that. And then we have the Two-Face Year One that came out in 2008. And I don't know if I should let Cartoonicus talk first, or if I should point out the main thing that I noticed right off, which was that the 1991 is very much coming. It's like right out of Frank Miller's Batman Year One, right down to the art style and the way that the narration is done and everything, so that you could put it right up as a tail end to Batman Year One and read them together. And Batman Year One kind of also introduced the fact that Batman was friends with Harvey Dent, that they were good friends before they became what they became. And I don't remember that being so much a part of Harvey Dent before the 80s. And then the Two-Face Year One in 2008 is really spinning out of the holiday killer thing. And it was hard for me because it's been a while since I've read
Yeah, and that
what is
was
it
in
called?
a
Long Halloween.
Long Halloween, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that I had read because it was a while for me since I had read Long Halloween. It's on my list. In fact, the funny thing is one of the things I had hoped to do with this year on the show was to read through Long Halloween again and do kind of a retrospective of that. But we haven't clearly done that yet. So, but that was one thing I read it, and I felt a little places where I was like, I don't know what I think about that. A Thrill Dragon is in the chat, says he is so excited for this. Hopefully, we live up to the hype of all of that. Because I didn't. I mean, we've all been really busy behind the scenes and missing each other, and some of the regular folk are off gallivanting around different parts of America. And so I wasn't sure who was going to make it today, but I was hoping that Twitless would be here because he always has the in-depth on the research. And there's a question that came up in reading these books. I couldn't remember when Gilda was invented. I had it in my head. I mean, I knew that she existed for like as a character in the animated series and in Batman Black and White. I think Tim and Denny actually did a story on Batman Black and White in their continuity where Gilda's a character in it. And it actually mirrors some of the points from this book, actually. I almost fished it out just to show it off, but I didn't. And so I was trying to remember if Gilda was created.
I'm pretty sure she predates the 80s.
Yeah.
I believe she's earlier than that. Yeah.
But for some reason, before I read this one again, I had a false memory. It's always Long Halloween, but never Long Christmas. Oh, that's hilarious.
Oh, 1942 is when she was created.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so she's original. She's from
okay.
the original Two-Face.
Cool,
yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
She's original.
I just looked up Gilda Dent.
Well, and it makes sense because Gilda is an authentic 1940s name.
Yeah.
She has an authentic 1940s woman's name. So,
Gilda Radner's the last Gilda I can think of is Gilda Radner. And
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody named Gilda since then.
No. Boy, sidetrack though, Gilda Radner, was she hilarious or what? She one of the most talented performers of the last 50 years. I hadn't really stopped to realize what an amazing performer she was until my kids were small. We got a bunch of the Muppet Show on DVD, and her on the Muppet Show, man, she does the whole business, song and dance and comedy shtick, physical comedy, verbal comedy. She was a completely well-rounded actor. So it was almost being on SNL was practically déclassé for the amount caliber performer she was. But anyhow, you guys didn't tune in to listen to me rant about Gilda Radner, so we'll move on. So, now, Cartoonicus, you were only able to finish one of the readings because I got them to everybody sort of late.
I am getting to the end of the other one right about now, I think.
Wow, that's fast.
Wow. Well, I'll just talk about Gilda Radner for a little bit longer, and then you'll be caught up.
I just hit the last page.
I wasn't able to speed read it because of the handwriting of the Bruce Wayne notations. It was very hard to read that.
Yeah. Oh, you know what got me still thinking about that? There is from a design choice. It makes sense because it's supposed to be like Batman's inner thoughts or his journal, especially in year one. It's clearly that Bruce is keeping a journal.
Mm-hmm.
But it got me thinking, like, kids, and they haven't been for probably 25 years, taught to read cursive in school for the most part.
Yeah, I don't know if it's 25 years, but yeah, they've been.
It's pretty close.
I was taught handwriting, but I never like to handwrite aside from my signature because it's very uncomfortable. I'd rather just type everything out. When I got married, I said, can we just like print up thank you notes? I can write a message really fast as a thank you. And they're like, no, you have to handwrite your thank yous. And it's like, why? Can't I just, and then we can get an Excel file with all the addresses and spit them out. And it's like, no, you have to handwrite the addresses for thank you notes. And it's like, old people have very particular fussy things.
Wait.
If you print them up a note and it's not handwritten and send that off, they'd be, I refuse to take this thank you. It's not handwritten. It's like,
Are you saying you still use letters and not emojis?
right.
So, but that's actually part of the interesting aspect with that, though, is it's not just the inconvenience of it, and I understand that because my handwriting is terrible, but the fact that we've actually are losing the skill of reading it.
Yeah,
and I think that's a shame because it script is very effective in getting the feeling across in a piece like this, and giving voice to Batman's thoughts. But also, you got the other thing that's shocking about it is thinking about how all of our founding documents are written in script, in cursive. And if you can't read cursive,
good point.
Yeah, pursuit of happiness. Yeah. No, it's not so much that it was cursive. It's just that the cursive itself in the printing in the comic was hard to read. It was very, very blotted, sort of.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues that I had too with it. Hey, Fizz, one of the issues that was too is like, of course, I'm reading on my actual newsprint copy, it's been sitting in a bag like a good little nerd, right, with a board in my closet. But there's still places where the text is bled, right, where you've got. Let's see if I can find a really good example, because for the most part, it's held up really well. Yeah. There's a couple of places where the script is just missing.
There's a reason why comic books have block printing, is because, at least traditionally, because of the poor printing quality. It's like you write in very big letters and very easy capital letters, because it might all run together. And that's why you never have anybody named Clint Flicker. So, yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
Fizz says, are you reviewing The Long Halloween, the only Two-Face story anyone cares about? No, we are not. Although we will be talking about The Long Halloween. So where do we want to start? Do we want to start chronologically, or do we want to go ahead and look into since we're talking Long Halloween right now?
Since we raised it, the big problem with that Two-Face year one is that you really need to remember the Long Halloween to remember what they're talking about when they keep mentioning Holiday Killer, or that Two-Face has killed people before he was Two-Face, and all this sort of stuff, and Maroni's son, and all these things which they don't really explain because they expect you to be familiar with the Long Halloween.
Yep.
And that was a stumbling block for me when reading
comics? No.
Well, and there is a lot of implicit commentary, and that's one of the things too. It also has to do. There are some of those deep lore cuts in this annual, but usually they're appended by somebody discussing it.
Yeah.
In the dialogue or whatever, because this was written at a time where every comic was somebody's first comic. This was nearly, I mentioned earlier in the show, this was nearly my first comic. It was not. I chose to not buy it at the time. I got a copy of the Green Hornet instead. But it was nearly my first comic. But this is written at a time where they expect all your 30-something nerds to have encyclopedically memorized everything that's been published over the last whatever. And so the books we're looking at here, Fizz says, what book is this? This is the Batman Annual number 14 from 1990. And this is Two-Face Year 1 from 2008.
I still love that cover. That's an amazing cover. That cover. That's a great cover.
This is a great cover. I'll give you that for 100%.
Yeah.
This cover, definitely better than this cover.
Yeah.
But this isn't bad, but this is better.
Yeah. And speaking of encyclopedic nerds, I have a little problem with the Two-Face year one, which is that it is set in year one, and yet you see Man-Bat in Arkham Asylum. He wasn't around in year one, and this is granted. I know that DC history is a big mess, and generally any good villain gets moved back to having always been part of the lore, but that does bug me because I know that in particular Killer Croc was introduced for the Jason Todd story. He was the villain who kills Jason Todd's parents in the original story.
That's right.
Yep.
But
And,
did they retcon that
ironically,
anyway,
though-
though? Because that wasn't that before Jason's actual origin.
right, and they've redone his origin, so
Yeah.
really,
and
they've
Jason's
redone
origin.
yeah,
Jason's post-crisis origin is that his parents were killed by Two-Face.
yeah, and
Surprisingly enough.
And Killer Croc is much more animalistic than just a guy who's got a skin condition and has filed down his teeth on purpose. You know, they kind of bring up that he's mutated. So
They monstered him up.
his whole backstory is different. And yeah, that big wonderful story is gone. So yeah, they can move him back. That's fine. They also put the ventriloquist back then. He was introduced around the time of Tim Drake. So
Yep, it was introduced after A Lonely Place of Dying, and before Robin year one. Well,
yeah,
and one of the things I want to back up just a little bit too. This Two-Face year one story, it's not set during Batman's year one, right? It is the first year of. It's supposed to be the first year of Two-Face, which is taking place in conjunction with the Long Halloween, which is a replacement itself for Batman year two. So, So Two-Face's first year is Batman's second year. And that's kind of how that all works. The year one convention is relative.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And of course, I should mention that Penguin, Riddler, Man-Bat, there's a lot of characters that aren't always in Arkham Asylum. In fact, one of the long lost stories that I really regret that Chuck Dixon never got to do was the one where because they've made Batman such a urban legend that nobody believes in, during his time that he was on the books, that there's doctors in Arkham Asylum who don't even know that Batman exists. And one of them says, I think there actually is a Batman. And he goes out there and he captures Batman, brings him in. It's actually Man-Bat that he's captured. And Man-Bat goes on, it just is a monster. Man-Bat is a monster, and he's trapped in the asylum with all these characters who are like screaming because there's a big bat monster and trapped in there with them. And it just sounds wonderful. And they never let him do it because Denny O'Neil didn't like the sci-fi characters like Man-Bat. So,
in fairness, Man-Bat's a horror character, not a sci-fi character.
Well, yeah, but he's drinking a fluid to become a monster. I think he's a good character, but
he's like Frankenstein. He borders that line. Frankenstein is definitely a horror story, but it's also the first science fiction tale. So and I would agree, Fizz. Why would Man-Bat be in Arkham Asylum if he's not when he isn't insane? The idea is that when as he becomes more animalistic, he loses his capacity to memorize on things. So that's all part of it. Okay,
but that's not really something you can deal with by having counseling.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's be honest. The only reason that Arkham Asylum exists is so that we can explain why half of these villains haven't been put to death like 10 times already.
Right.
And that is fair. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and zip over to share the screen here, and get our pictures of our cover. Okay, where to go? Here we go. There it is.
For Fizz asked a question, where he said, "I always thought Two-Face killed Jason's parents." No, originally it was Killer Croc, and this was a different Jason Todd who had red hair, and it's a great story. I'm trying to remember. I think it's Detective Comics 527.
Yeah,
is
back
where
in
that
like
paid off.
1980 and like 1984, I think.
And it's
was
wonderful, but too many people thought he was an exact copy of Dick Grayson, and they wanted to kind of dirty him up, and so they came up with a whole new origin for him. And that one, yes, Two-Face killed his dad or something like that. So yeah,
right. Yeah, Two-Face.
Anyway.
Jason Todd's parents go, instead of being like an acrobat family, that knew the Graysons from years on back and had a family connection to or a business connection to Dick. They ended up being just no good nicks, criminals and drug addicts and that kind of thing. And so Jason, post-crisis Jason pretty much grew up on the streets as an urchin, whereas pre-crisis Jason had a really good home life until his parents were murdered as part of an extortion plot with the Killer Croc.
Right. And that's why there's a very brief 84, 85, 86. You can see a Jason Todd who's smiling and happy and looks like Dick Grayson from the 1940s, basically. And then that's replaced by this petulant, abrasive youngster from like 87.
Well,
onward.
and even there even some of the Jason Todd after the crisis, like during the what was it, the alien invasion event?
Yeah.
I can't remember what that was called. Invasion. Derp. Yeah. Invasion has a Jason that's pretty happy to be part of everything, and he's got a really good attitude. And it's in the time after that he starts getting really dark. And I think it was because they were leading up to wanting to have a real dramatic moment in for the death in the family as they were leading into that. So anyway, let's just kind of go over some of the notes on this. Two-Face year one jumps into the idea that Harvey's the DA, that he's working, that he's involved with Batman and Gordon already, and they're trying to the commissioner of police, if I'm remembering right, is trying to get after them. Why are you going after all these mob guys when you should be going after the holiday killer? Once again, demanding that that the holiday killer is a thing. So if you don't know the holiday killer is a thing, you're going to be really confused about why that's a thing. So this plays into
honestly,
also the idea.
To me, it just came off as a noodle incident.
A noodle incident?
Never heard of it in terms. It comes from Calvin and Hobbes. Whenever they would joke about the quote noodle incident, and the joke is that you never find out what it actually is, but your imagination can make it so much bigger and better than anything.
Okay.
Well, you can do that with serious stuff as well. I can just hear about the holiday killer and feel like, oh crap, there's something going on.
Yeah. Like Moonlighting always referred to this Anselmo case that they never said what the Anselmo case was.
Ooh, Moonlighting. Man, that was a great show.
I only know that because of the Elongated Man connection, where he had a gun that said Anselmo, and they said that's a Moonlighting joke, and I didn't even get that because I never seen Moonlighting. Never.
I loved that show when
like
I was a
3
kid.
episodes.
That was great. But anyway,
but that's what it is, the Noodle Incident, Anselmo case. It's one of
those.
I mean,
that's what the Clone Wars was in Star Wars too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was never meant to be explained. And man, if only they'd kept to that rule. Because it sounds a lot cooler than it was. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, moving that along. So there's all this political intrigue going on and the thing, and then we see that Harvey's in therapy because he's really messed up. He's got all of these deeply seated emotional problems, but he's trying to deal with them, and that's part of the deal. So this comic goes very heavy into the office politics there at the courthouse as we're dealing with Harvey's life, and he ends up trying to put together it's Gotham City. Everyone's corrupt, and so they're going through. And they're getting a group of guys together to have a crack team of investigators that are going to report directly to Gordon, and work along with the DA's office to get around all of the politics, the dirty politics in the area. So
I like that guy.
Yeah,
I don't think we've ever seen him aside from this story, but he's great. The Jewish guy Cohen, who everybody picks on him, and he's like, I'm the first Jewish detective, and I don't want to ruin it for everybody by getting that wrong. And
I have a really hard time believing that, okay, so this is 2008, right? So let's take DC's rotating timeline.
Right.
So 2008, you're dealing with 15 years before 2008 is what? 93. Is that the math? Right?
Yeah.
I have a really hard time believing that in 1993, right, that the first time a Jewish person made detective was in a major metropolitan East Coast city.
Yeah.
Was 1993.
But it's a 1993 where they wear fedoras. So, it's like it's always the 1940s and 50s in Gotham City. Really, it is.
Okay.
Well, that's
Maybe-
the thing also, just because
Maybe
it's
that's fair. Maybe
2008
that's fair.
at the time of the printing of the comic does not mean it's 2008 in the story.
Mm-hmm. True. It's,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's DC Comics that the reason they used the rotating timeline at the time that this came out was because everything happens now. So you'd go back to how many years it was previously, because everything you're reading is happening in the eternal now.
Yeah.
And so as you build this timeline out, it would go back. So this was at the time when they were assuming that Batman's career had been about 15 years. So actually, this is 94 at the time. I did the math wrong because this is year 2. Batman's year 2. So
yeah. But it's weird how it's never really the modern times in Gotham City. I mean, even it's not. It's always the kind of vague 70s. They don't go back to when they're not doing the 1940s. They're doing the cop dramas of the 1970s. The dirty cop, Dirty Harry type stuff. But they never really set things in the modern world in Batman, is all I'm saying.
Well, I noticed one thing I realized while reading it tonight was that if anybody ever, wants to argue about what city Gotham is actually supposed to be, I just want to point out the sheer number of insanely Italian gangsters there always are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there were almost no Italian gangsters prior to Batman Year 1. So
that's great. So Gotham got up and moved.
It be suddenly decided we're in Jersey now. Hey,
that's funny.
Well, I think there was actually something that I got from DC Comics once that had the address for Gotham City, and it just said NJ after Gotham City.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly when it started being considered in Jersey, but I know by the time they did the role-playing game, they did the DC Atlas. In fact, I just recently bought a copy of the old DC Atlas for the role-playing game, and it was New Jersey on that, and Metropolis was Delaware, I think. So
Delaware.
Yeah.
I always thought it was just assumed that Metropolis and New York are pretty much the same thing, but they're two separate cities.
Since I brought it up, hang on just a second. I gotta
wait a minute. They're a two-faced city.
Yeah.
One is perpetual. One half of the city is perpetually day. The other is perpetually night. Oh gosh, that would be a great idea.
Did he leave just to go get the Atlas?
Oh, I don't know.
I didn't mean to.
But that would be a hilarious thing to do in a spoof on DC.
When we were talking about the now and everything, I was thinking about how there's a lot of stuff that newspapers are old. I mean, even Denny tried to get rid of that by having Clark Kent go to work for the TV back in the 70s because newspapers were dated. And now, nobody gets a newspaper. The newspaper organizations still exist, but they publish to the web. And, you've got, of course, everybody with Batman points out, you've got a billionaire going to watch a theater and then walk through a dark, alleyway and, trying to make this work when he wasn't always that rich way back when. And, you're trying to reconcile all these things over time. And even my favorite character, Elongated Man, I was thinking, his wife is a debutante, and there's no debutante balls around, but she'd probably be an influencer, more like Paris Hilton nowadays, not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Here's the. I'm going to make my full screen myself
Go ahead. Go ahead.
if I can do it. Is it going to let me? Oh, come on. Oh, there we go. Okay.
There you go.
So here's the. If it might thing will. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
There it is. So here, there's New Jersey. This here at number 9, that's Gotham.
Okay.
10, that's Metropolis.
Okay.
On the DC Atlas for the role-playing game, right? And then New York is, of course, right here. And the reason that it can't be there is there just isn't enough territory for there to have New York and another metro area.
Right.
So you've got the way this is laid out now. At this point, it's a little different because of the addition of Bloodhaven. So the idea is that on the very tip of this point would be Bloodhaven, and then on an island off the coast of New Jersey is where Gotham is, because it's all built on an island in the area surrounding the island. And so then on the other edge of Bloodhaven's up the coast where the whales came in. So that's the ticket. Why
every
is it
movie
Metropolis?
that has ever shown Gotham with a Statue of Liberty is a lie?
Well, they could have a giant statue, but yeah, Fizz says, why is it Metropolis in Kansas? Because everybody who makes comic books used to live in New York.
Yeah.
So,
and Smallville used to be upstate New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. So let's get back to the Two-Face. Get myself off the screen. Here we go.
We should do a stream about superhero cities.
Yes, we absolutely should. We actually did. I did talk about geography a few years ago, but it'd be nice to revisit it with some different people's opinion on stuff. So
I actually got to talk to James Robinson about how absurd Opal City is. It has no suburbs. It's part of the West, and also pirates live there. And it's got canyons, and I mean, it's basically like Springfield,
right.
in being geographically impossible.
Well, and the thing is like the total sidetrack on this. For Opal City was one of my favorite cities reading Starman, and based on the stuff that it has there, because there were like in real world history, like Jean Lafitte. Right, the pirate actually sailed and traveled up the Mississippi and ended up in Ohio at one point, right? So yeah, I think it was Ohio, through tributaries and stuff. So the idea that there were pirates in the Great Plains, I mean, that did happen, right? And so like if Opal City, and all the thing is, if you live out here, I mean, Minneapolis is not unlike this. It's a little unlike this, but like Denver, Lincoln, Omaha, Wichita, they have something like suburbs, but they also have it where the suburbs stop and then it's just nothing, right? So like Dead Turk County could be in Iowa. It could be in Nebraska. It could be in Southern Illinois, right? So I had always pictured Opal City being, near a major river like the Mississippi, or like in Wisconsin where they've got the Great Lakes or something there, but also like in the Great Plains somewhere, because it seems like that it should be out west that way. But like all the recent stuff says it's up the in Maryland, not far from Baltimore. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. And I thought that it just didn't make any kind of sense at all. I just hated the whole idea of it until my last trip to DC a few years ago. I went for a work conference, and I took a day. Our plane got snowed in, and so we had an extra day. And so I spent the day touristing, and I went up to Bethesda, Maryland. And what did I see in Bethesda, Maryland? But a statue to the pioneers. And apparently it was not an uncommon thing in the like 1850s, 1860s for people to come to America to homestead in through Bethesda and start their westward trail to St. Joe before going out from St. Joe to like Washington or Oregon, And so they had people that would start in Bethesda and trek across the Appalachians and then into the Ohio River Valley and then keep going west from there. And I never knew that. I just knew that if you like the main Oregon Trail starting in St. Joe, going across by Laramie Peak and on the way, and so that there is pioneer history that far east, I was blown away by. I had never known that. And probably because I grew up, in the High Plains area, all along the plateau here, so that's all we talk about. It's just So, Tankatron, technically we're talking about Two-Face, but we're going to get back to it in a second. So, I do have a question for you guys. In this story, this little wormy blonde guy, I can't find his name in the book after going back through it again. I know he's got a name, Vernon something or other.
Yeah.
But I can't remember. Couldn't find his actual name on it.
And I think he's supposed to be Harvey Dent's assistant.
Yes.
And Harvey Dent has an assistant in the other story, but it's a different name, I believe.
That's
but he's also is he also Vernon in that story?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so he kind of has they have the same plot point, and
he looks
I don't know
the
if it was
same.
even intentional that they tried to mirror the earlier story, or they would have tried to keep the same name. So
I would think so. And the guy looks the same. He's got the same physical appearance, but I don't seem to find that guy's. The guy's name is Vernon something or other. I don't see or something Vernon. I don't know.
Yeah,
I couldn't find his name and going back over it again, which I thought was weird. But I also didn't look super close. Yeah. So let's speed this along a little.
Go ahead.
So in the story, Harvey Dent sets up this working with Jim Gordon, sets up this strike team of people from outside. They get Maggie Sawyer, because she's originally from Gotham, but moved to Metropolis and dealt with Superman in his year one, and then came back to live here for some sort of reason, and which I think they may have mentioned, but I'm skipping past it and I'm going to think about it. They get Harvey Bullock in here. They get, because he's too mean to be bought, they get this Jewish fellow whose name I also just don't remember right now.
Cohen, I believe.
Cohen, yes, that's right. And so they're getting this little team together to
the Untouchables.
The Untouchables, that's exactly right.
They would basically make that reference, yeah.
Including Wormy Man right here, which I can't remember that guy's name for nothing. Anyway, and they're supposed to be grabbing information on Maroni. He says the other thing is Maroni's been captured, but he's got the Gotham City mob, got all the connections. They're afraid of people putting pressure on the jurors, all that kind of stuff. So the only way to keep from doing that is to break the power of the mob when the boss is away, and it's a whole big. And it's like I enjoyed a lot of the action, a lot of the thingamies, right? In there, in the story, it was fairly enjoyable. It was just so heavily tied to Long Halloween, as far as all that stuff goes. So I felt that was distracting for it. The other thing that this story does, it introduces Mort Weinstein, who is a classmate of Harvey's who always picked on him and was just his bully. And so Biff Tannen here, who was a corporate lawyer, he was a bigwig, and instead of going into public service right out of law school, he went and made his bones as a corporate lawyer and as a as a defense lawyer. So he's got lots and lots of money, and now he wants to run for district attorney. And Harvey's convinced that this guy is on the pay of the big crime boss families. And that's part of that story. Here's a flashback where they got into a big fist fight. Oh, and in this story, it also talks about that Bruce and Harvey were buddies from university days. Like when before Bruce dropped out, they had met and they had kept in touch from all this kind of stuff. So were you sneezing or laughing?
Sorry, I talked over it.
I guess I'm not getting an answer to that. It's okay. So anyway, so that's that whole deal, and Bruce is like trying to they do a lot to build up that relationship between them as good buddies, which I don't think this story introduces the idea of that. I mean, I know that the Batman movie Dark Knight has them become pretty good friends, and I believe they talk about in the animated series, isn't it, that Harvey and Bruce have a previous relationship from something or other.
Oh, not as Batman, because
Yeah,
Batman
not
Year
as
One, Batman Year One had Batman working with Harvey Dent, but as far as them
But
knowing
Bruce
each
and
other,
Harvey were friends before
Yeah.
they got into public life. I think it was in the animated series.
yeah,
Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know that introduced it. I think the comics kind of had. I don't know. It's really hard for me to remember when but I'm pretty sure Bruce was like a campaign contributor who thought that he was a good guy, and that's the DA that you kind of need to have if you're going to clean up Gotham. So I don't know when that first was introduced. Yeah.
So Colin says we assigned reading Long Halloween. No, the assigned reading was there's two things we did. One was Two-Face Year One, which spins out of the events and tells a story between the panels of Long Halloween. So in it, it's not Loeb, it's Mark Sable, Jesus Saiz, Jimmy Palmiotti, and Chris Chuckry are the creative team on that one. So it definitely takes place within the apron strings or whatever of Long Halloween, but it's not Long Halloween again. So, so
What are you laughing at? What now?
oh, in the chat there, Tankatron said what we're talking about. Cartoonicus said Two-Face, the comic. That's not a jab at you. Did you enjoy it or was it trash? I felt really mixed about it, and we'll get into that. The first volume I thought was more standout, the first issue, but the second issue I've had some real issues with because of kind of it seemed like I don't know. We'll get into that, but I think I paid $5 for the two comics, so I didn't feel like I was hurt by that purchase. So, but yeah. So anyway, dealing with everybody with Harvey's fun personal drama and
what happens there? What happens in the middle or that top there? That the bloody knife and is that Maggie Sawyer or is that somebody else?
I don't know.
I thought it was Maggie Sawyer, but now I kind of wonder if that's because Maggie Sawyer is a Catholic. For a moment, I thought she was going to church, and then I realized, wait a minute, maybe that's not her. But
yeah, I don't think so. Because here she is wearing blue jeans, and this person's wearing.
Is it the holiday? Is it something related?
I think this may supposed to be Gilda. I do not remember because I've not read Long Halloween long enough. I'm not sure if she's blonde in that one. I know she's brunette in the other book we're going to talk about here. So, anyway,
the thing about this comic is that there was a lot of jumps around.
That was one of the things. One of my complaints with it was that I didn't feel like the flow was particularly good with this comic. Which is why, like, I mean, was it trash? No, but I mean, it also there were definitely, and I felt like this is one of the questions I had, and maybe if we do go back and do Long Halloween as a show, we'll see if some of those cuts are because it's too heavily dependent on the source material, which I kind of suspect that might be the case.
I can tell you it is. Affirmatively, it is too dependent on that because I don't even get this scene here with the body full of holes. Is that somebody that we are supposed to know? Is it one of the characters that because now Harvey Dent is killing them? Or I really couldn't follow this because there's so much stuff that ties in with that external story, and then there's also flashbacks where Harvey Dent has his face done, but then all of a sudden he's back to looking normal, and it's because it's a flashback. And there was some extensive flashbacks.
And
I really had trouble following
I
this.
want to move on, but I do want to ask, why is Alfred Hitchcock holding up this butcher shop? That's the site, the thing on
They
that.
had to make his cameo.
Yeah, that's the thing. So we'll skip forward a little bit here, as we get on looking at it. But basically, there are a lot of killings that are going on that seem to have something to do with the Maroney family, and they're investigating the whole business. And this is all before anything happens to Two-Face, right? So, but a lot of it's political intrigue. And one of the things that comes up that flash back to the past, we want to hit on this, is Weinstein, the classmate of Harvey and the other guy who's running for office, and we see that the Weinstein has spying on Harvey back in the day, and has discovered that has gone in and stolen his diagnosis information. Now, here is an issue that I have with this book right here. This is one of these nitpicks. This is a nitpick because I'm in the field, right, of human services, right? Even before HIPAA was a thing, right? And this would have, without question, been before HIPAA was a thing. If somebody stole another person's file, the practitioners are going to know about it. They may not know who took it, but this is a plot point where this has been secret this whole time until such a time as Weinstein releases it later on to sully or to try to hold Harvey for ransom. But like, people would have known that something had gone on. You're not just gonna like hide that kind of stuff because even before HIPAA was a thing, the professional dangers that you would have with losing track of somebody's medical file would be like business ending. So this is one of these things where it's just crazy.
He would have called his patient and said somebody has gotten at your files.
Yeah, they would have called the patient. They would have called the police. They would have, the whole business. So it's one of those things. So Najee says, is this supposed to be a tie-in to Long Halloween? Yes. I thought Long Halloween was only sort of, kind of, not really canon. It is now in the post-52 world. At the time this book came out, it was a replacement for Batman Year 2. So the reading order went, instead of Batman Year 1, Batman Year 2, Batman Year 3. It changed from Batman Year 1, Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and like a third of Batman Year 3 that was whatever was incorporated into Lonely Place of Dying from Batman Year 3 was still considered canon.
I did not know about Batman Year 2. Of course, Batman Year 2 has Joe Chill, and they tried to get rid of Joe Chill. Yeah, and it's my big peeve with my buddy. It's like Chuck Dixon does not like Joe Chill, and I'm like, I think that story. I think so many of the Joe Chill stories are great, but I don't see why Batman wouldn't carry on if he found out who murdered his parents. And I thought
I agree. I
thought that Year 2 was a really well written story, and of course it became Mask of the Phantasm. So much of that was cribbed from Year 2, but
yes.
Anyway, yeah.
There are not earthquakes. My table is really shaky, and normally I just have my mouse to move around with, and I try not to lean on the table, but my mouse got left at my office, and so I'm leaning in to use the mouse pad for things. So, yeah, Chuck Dixon gets mentioned not infrequently.
Sorry.
No, it's great. Chuck's brilliant. So he deserves to get mentioned a lot more than he does. So, okay. No, that's not what I meant. Okay. Try to move along here.
You can not only try, you can succeed.
I am. Yeah. I'm just trying to skip past because I didn't make notes or nothing. See. So here we go. I want to get back over here. We have the big issue with Maroney working for the Roman, which gets mentioned, of course, in Batman Year 1, and is of a big factor in Long Halloween. That move over from the gangsters to the freaks that is in the Long Halloween is echoed in this scene, right? And so we have Vernon. Now, Vernon might have a name in Long Halloween. I just thought about that. He might show up in Long Halloween. We'll have to look into that. Who knows? But basically, Maroney comes to this guy and says, "Hey, here's a ticket. The Roman wants you to give this fast-acting antacid because we got to do something about Dent." La da 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 da, and he gives it. I think that's actually Zuko who gives it to. No, that's Weinstein. That's what it is. Well, my memory's going bad. This is Weinstein who gives it to Vernon, and Vernon gives it to Maroney, and Maroney splashes it in Dent's face.
Mhm.
Ta-da!
To assassinate somebody.
Yeah, you would think that wouldn't work too well. I mean, granted, acid attacks are pretty common out there in the world. There are that happens not
Especially if you're a
infrequently
girl trying to learn,
in
that happens a lot.
certain
Yeah.
places. Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's not
Or
fatal.
go to
So
church.
what's he trying to do? It's not fatal.
Right, but that's part of the thing. Like way back in the origin story was the acid, and so it's still the acid, right?
Yeah.
And then here we have the coin shows up in this book, right? Oh, relax, Maroney. It looks like it's your lucky day. Unfortunately, according to Alberto here, it's a holiday, right? So we have the idea of the coin flip and the holiday thing, which once again only makes sense if you are if you've got Long Halloween stuck in your head, right? So we don't, right? Because we've talked about that. So wormy guy, takes a bullet. That's his end. And here we've got the face reveal of Two-Face to be continued. All right. So first one is pretty decent as far as a cop procedural crime story goes. I definitely enjoyed that first issue, although it was a little by the book in a lot of ways. And it has a pretty huge cast, which is one of the aspects on here. But in book 2 is where it gets weird, right? And part of that is because you see this guy Weinstein who's running for office. He's because Harvey's the DA and he's gone on the lam and gone and start killing people. This Weinstein guy is appointed by the mayor to be the fill-in DA. He takes over the task force and tells to everybody, okay, here's the story. We are going to go over the freaks, not the mobsters. That's what we're going to do. And especially we're getting rid of this Batman guy. So we're going to do the thing where we try to lure Batman with the bat signal. And of course, it's not going to work. And then Harvey shows up in court. Well, that seems weird to me, but he tries to hold the court hostage because somebody in there was crooked, and that's how he got all scarred up. And here's the deal. And so he goes and starts shooting people in public.
Yeah. The second half of the story, isn't he at some point still running for office while he's Two-Face?
Yeah, that's
it's
the thing.
so unclear. It's
at the end we have this whole deal where it goes crazy because it goes crazy. And then we have Two-Face dealing with his whole hang up. So here's a scene. There's one scene in this that I thought I couldn't decide if it was clever or not. And the first time I read it, my fingers got stuck on the pages and didn't turn right. So I didn't get where it just seemed to pop out of nowhere. But Two-Face now has a gang. And his gang, they've got these full drape face masks, and they're going after this Rob. Well, you've got a Joe Coyne or whatever they call him, who the giant penny in Batman's thing is from this case. It's a memento of this case, and this is the post-crisis, post-Zero Hour version of this story, and So there's a fight over who's going to do this job. Two-Face says it's him. Coin says it's him. And like that whole page, I missed this whole page when I was reading it the first time. So I was really confused when they showed up again. Because there's now a hostage situation in the thing. And so the two gangs are fighting over who's going to take the money. And one person wants all the coins and one person wants all the like $2 bills or some sort of business there. And they end up dropping this coin on top of Joe Coin, and that's the end of Joe Coin. And
Squish, yeah.
Squish, yeah, it's all like behind the scenes. And
Wait, is this supposed to be the origin of the giant coin in the Batcave?
yes. Yeah. And that actually is the origin of the giant coin is from the Golden Age stories, where there was a criminal named Joe Coin that only robbed change. And something like this went down, but not exactly this way. I don't think Two-Face was involved in the original story, and I haven't looked it up to double check it. But here you have in our new PG-13 comics, here's one half of Joe over here, and here's the other half of Joe over here. And I don't believe Joe was killed in the original. I think he just was put in jail, and that was the end of that. And here's the other thing: you've got as far as this goes too, it retroacts Crispin. What's his name?
Addicts?
To being
Bach. Is his name Bach? Block?
Well,
Brock?
there's
I can't remember.
I can't remember anyway. But this was a detective that came about was created after Tim Drake, and then they retrojected him here into year one is a different part of the department, and year two is a different part of the department, which just is kind of annoying to me. But anyway, this is all part of the tension of getting into the weeds too much, but of the politics in there. But here's where it gets super weird, right? All of a sudden, like Two-Face decides that he has to fight. He has to gather up all of the freaks, and deal with them and draw that in. And so here he is. They're all having a big party for Two-Face for DA, and they're going to try to, because since he's still on the ballot, he's going to run. And he's going to do it by getting the power of the criminals to be his phone bank and stuff. And it's just crazy. Meanwhile, they're also dealing with this, which is a silly like Silver Age plot point, like out of the Batman cartoon. 66 series. And then meanwhile, there's also all this mob stuff going on. The Two-Face is involved in the mob stuff. And it just seems really like the thing doesn't even know what it is at this point.
It's
right?
all over the place. Yeah.
It's so all over the place. And some of these flashbacks, and there's the judge gets kidnapped, and Two-Face is gonna kill the judge, but then Batman discovers that she was just thrown in a garbage can for some reason.
Yeah.
And
probably because of his coin.
Yeah, you're probably right. That's probably the reason, but it's so everywhere that it doesn't seem. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's one kind of thing. It's like the whole thing doesn't want to be whatever. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then you have these emotional aspects with he goes to try to talk to the doctor because the doctor's been trying to help him for all this time, and he gets there and the doctor's killed himself. And here's that scene to scar everybody. Oh, hey, Jim Tooner shows up with the knowledge here. Joe Coin began his career selling nickel-priced newspapers as a kid, getting fresh with people giving him pennies for tips. As he got older, he would get in trouble for various penny problems. There we go.
Yeah. Talk about things no longer relevant to the modern world. Pennies.
Yeah, it says his protection racket was based on the penny tax system, kind of. Yeah. The Penny Plunderer was his superhero villain name. I think Joe Coin would be.
Can you go back to 89, page 89?
Yeah, yeah.
This was, yeah, they actually get rid of Gordon for for a brief moment. They put the guy then in charge of the. It's not the same person that they usually have in charge of the
SWAT.
what do you call it? SWAT, yeah. But it's another guy who's also a hothead, ready to send in and just blast everybody. And yeah, it actually, I think that blonde is supposed to be an innocent person. They shoot a horse. They're pumping. They're just shooting everywhere. And then there's other people that are already dead. I think because the Joker killed them. I don't know. It's so unclear what is happening here because I don't know. I'm just not following.
What's happening is that a major Batman fan is trying to rely on his knowledge of the entire Batman history to write his backstory.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably fairly accurate. So, while the other thing is like this whole business with the criminals being the phone bank is made to seem like it lasts for quite a while, but like this hostage situation turned murder spree should have been dealt with I can't see how it could have been dealt with more quickly, especially when you consider all the hijinks and various things that Two-Face is involved with dealing with all the different hostage negotiations and everything else. And then suddenly he's kidnapped Weinstein and he's going to torture him, right? There's the whole thing. And
this is the page that ticked me off about.
And again,
everybody.
Everybody's here all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no idea that they could have appeared at different times in Batman's career. All of the freaks are there from the very beginning, and it's always just one giant thing.
Scroll back up just a second. That one's Maxie Zeus next to Killer Croc there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Did you know that Maxie Zeus was never supposed to be any kind of real character? That they were looking for crime lord names to mention, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, he knocked over Maxie Zeus's place." It was just a throwaway word, and then they were like, somebody's like, "Who's Maxie Zeus?" And they came up with this whole thing where he thinks he's a god, and it was prompted by somebody coming up with a, well, we don't want it to all be Italians, so Maxie Zeus.
What this whole comic is starting to remind me of is one of those later X-Men movies, starting with Wolverine, where they were just having to throw in as many different characters as they possibly could, even if they were only there for 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do like it that the Joker is he votes not Bilty, he votes Bilty, just like the ventriloquist, because he can't say the letter G.
Yeah.
But I think he gets that wrong. He uses G's in place of B's. He says Gatman because he can't say Batman. That's the problem. So he's getting it wrong. The speech impediment is actually backwards. But anyway, and then there's Man-Bat there, and he shouldn't be there. Killer Croc shouldn't be there, and Ventriloquist shouldn't be there.
Well, I'm not even, and Mad Hatter, I don't even think would have been a year 1 or a year 2 villain either. I wouldn't think, but and Poison Ivy definitely not. Poison Ivy
definitely not. Is she supposed to be 40 years old now?
Well, and she's also, here's also, she's green. Like, she didn't get to be green until after a Cataclysm.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of those nerd nitpicks, but there you have it.
It's all nitpicks on that page.
Well, and I guess really this entire show is nerd nitpicks.
Nerd nitpicks, yeah.
That's the whole channel if you really get down to it.
Yeah. By the way, every time I look for Mattriarchy, it brings up Matriarchy, and I have the hardest time finding the show. Maybe you need to call it Nerd Nitpicks.
New show next week.
Yeah.
Brand new show. Okay, so, moving along the big old fight. Yep. Also, I want to one thing I want to ask on this, something that I don't know, other than in toys, has this clown-faced, Joker-nosed clown hammer been used in the comics? Other than comics relating to the toy lines before.
Is it like you're saying it's more of a superpowers thing?
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember seeing that outside of toys. I mean, comics related specifically to the superpowers collection.
Yeah, him having a gigantic mallet came from that. I don't know that he had one that actually looked like a nose. I didn't notice that until you pointed it out there.
Yeah.
At first, when I saw that, I thought they had somehow put the Metal Men in there.
So
does look like tin. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be surprising.
Yeah. Oh man, I love Cohen grabs the Mad Hatter's hat and shoves it down over the pretty lady and says, "Only my wife gets to kiss me." It's just
that guy's
great.
a badass. He is. He's probably the best part of this entire comic series. So
the one time they created something new out of all these old characters. Here's Maggie Sawyer before she was famous. Here's even Harvey Bullock isn't supposed to be a year one character, but now he is.
And they did like they've done that with like in adaptations. They put Harvey Bullock back to Gordon before he was lieutenant days in that Gotham TV series.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to get right down to it, Maggie Sawyer is thinking of 3 Batman villains who don't exist, or Superman villains that don't exist. When she's hit with the fear poison, she sees Bizarro and
you're right.
None of those guys should be there.
See, here's the problem with not being able to kill off Batman villains. 15 years later, Poison Ivy is still a problem. Two-Face is still a problem. Joker is still a problem. Penguin is still a problem.
Yeah.
I just don't want them killed off. They're too good. I don't. You want an excuse for them not to be removed, but yeah.
The issue isn't that they're still a problem, because I mean that's what makes serial storytelling interesting. Like, the only reason to kill off Moriarty is because you're getting ready to kill off Sherlock Holmes. I mean, that's the bottom line. But the issue is, are the stories still engaging? Because there is always. I mean, we're already reading stories about a man who dresses up as a bat to scare criminals. Facing off against a man who pretends he's a penguin. I mean, come on. And I'm oversimplifying, but like there's a level of silliness that's intrinsic to it, and I think that's okay. It's just that, are they doing it in a way that makes sense? And it's like, you want. I don't know. I just think that, especially when you're talking about, if you're telling a story that's a history story, then the history it's playing with ought to make sense. Fizz says Mad Hatter is the golden age, and I agree. Mad Hatter should be one of the early villains. My question is whether or not he should be a Batman year 2 villain, as opposed to like a Batman year 4 villain. Does he predate Robin or not? That's the kind of the question that I have, and I don't know. I feel like he's not a pre-Robin villain, and we know that's the year 3 story point in this continuity. Yeah, I know, Fizz. I was being in specific with it, but he does quack and walk and make penguin noises to play up his bit. So
the basic problem with the whole timeline thing is that, if you'll remember, that Robin was like a fully grown, matured character by the time the Justice League was created in the 60s. He was actually getting to be like the teen Wonder instead of the boy Wonder. And right around that time, and then you try to make a new timeline where the Justice League happens right around the same time as year 1. And it's like, well, now you have the Justice League exists before Robin does. And that's kind of weird, so it's like, you're going to have to backdate things regardless of what publishing was in our real world. So I understand moving all these characters back. As I've always said, the hard part is, I would just like to know what is the history. Because I feel like you want to change the history to make it work for you, fine, but tell me what the history is.
Which, considering the number of times DC goes out of their way to do some event comic to specifically reboot the entire universe, you'd think that would be on the top of their list.
So one plot point that I left out in this section here is that part of the reason they're all together after they escaped from the Iceberg Club thingamy or whatever it is was that they're holding a trial for Weinstein. They're holding, and that's why he's all chained to torture. And so one of the plot points is that Two-Face is still running for office, and Two-Face is holding his own trial while the other wacky hijinks and the deals going south with the mob families all happening at once. So it kind of feels like a take on the end of Mad World, where like everything, all these stray parts are coming together all at once. And so I generally enjoyed it just because I like the parts, but I don't necessarily think it was the best way to go about telling that story. And that's kind of my take on it for this one. But what did you guys think? Does that make sense? Did you guys have other problems other than the nerd nitpicks? Are there story element issues you had with this, or
I'm
would you think?
not appreciative of a comic that had made me have to witness 40 murders before it was over. This I am always reminded why I keep quitting Batman, and then I forget and I come back again.
So your relation with Batman is like the opposite of those fellows from Brokeback Mountain. You're saying?
I wouldn't know what that.
Oh
means.
yeah, that's why I quit you.
You could call it like an abusive relationship. I keep leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back.
I think
this would have been. I think this would have been so much of a better story if they hadn't been trying to rope in all those Batman villains in this for no reason whatsoever. Really, it is no reason whatsoever, and the more coherent. I mean, it just goes incoherent in the second half. The first half is pretty good. I liked a lot of the stuff. I loved the gathering of, even though it's, like I say, you have to bring in Maggie Sawyer. You can't just bring in some new cop. I appreciate Cohen just because you made something new and I like him. That's great. But aside from Cohen, everything else is bringing in characters that we know really too early, trying to make this whole story work. And one of the problems I have with both books is the whole Maroni and Carmine Falcone and things. It's like all these characters. Maroni was introduced for the Two-Face origin story way back in 1942, and then is it? I forget which character it is. One of the other ones that they mention all the time is the one whose his insurance racket is what dooms the parents of Robin. And was another one-off mention of a mobster who then becomes like a pivotal monster. So Carmine Falcone and all these characters became way too big because they wanted to turn them into a big crime family, and it's gotten to the point I can't even keep them straight anymore.
Yeah, Tony Zuko.
Tony Zuko is that
the only time I've really seen Tony Zuko in a way that I thought was interesting was in Batman Year 3, and Tony Zuko from Batman Year 3 was instantly written out as soon as 0 Hour happened. Like all of the things that made him a unique character and not just generic mobster number one were scrubbed in 0 Hour. And that was largely Marv Wolfman's creation, the Zuko as seen in Year 3. That was largely Wolfman's creation, I understand, and I really enjoyed it. But it was not. It was just another mobster. And then when he was used again in, I think in Robin Year 1, it was just a generic mobster number 3. There was no who has to die when Dick is really young and all that kind of stuff. So,
I forget what I've completely forgotten Year 3 from my mind. I don't remember the story at all. I know I read it,
Yeah. Well, year 3 there's actually 2 stories that are in it. One is the story of it's just retelling Robin's origins. And you know how you know what happened, how his parents died, how Bruce took him in, how he discovers that Bruce is Batman, how Batman takes him under his wing, la da 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 da, all that kind of stuff. And then the other side of the story is it's 15 years later, Zuko lived. He's been in prison the whole time. And the way he had risen in the mob, he instead of being an old mobster, he's a very young mobster when he goes in. And what happened is that he started as an accountant, and basically kept everyone's secrets, and he kept them all written down somewhere. And so he extorted his way up the hill, and he was able to like basically extort people into killing his enemies who would be willing to like try to rub him out for knowing stuff. And he kept all of his evidence secret, the secret ledger. And when he gets out, Dick comes. He takes time off the Titans and goes to try to find out what's going on, because he hears Zuko's getting out. And then there's that's a whole part of the story. Super fun stuff. And in fact, in A Lonely Place of Dying, the reason that like when Tim goes looking for Dick and can't find him, it's because Dick is dealing with this emotional baggage from Zuko's death. Because spoiler alert for a 30-year-old comic, almost 40, Zuko is he dies at the end, and it really messes Dick up. And so that's where Dick is at when Tim finds him at the circus again.
Yeah,
so,
because that's an important part of Robin's history, is that he did not want Zuko dead. He wanted justice. And it was like, that's what caused Bruce to say, okay, I can work with this kid, because if all he wants is for me to go kill this guy, that's not what I'm about, and I'm not going to teach this kid. And he's like, no, I just want him brought to justice. And so he brings him to justice, and he goes to prison, and like you say, he's still rising through the ranks in prison and everything. So
even in prison, because nobody will touch him, because he's like, well, I know I've got the secrets, and I know I got people on the outside that'll spread my secrets if you don't. And of course, that part of the story was nonsense. But anyway, so that's the story. And Wolfman did I think a great job with those characters. Batman Year 3 is it's way too good to be as forgotten as it is. So
I should go find it and reread it. And it's interesting, because Wolfman is not a Batman writer. He's not amongst the Batman crew, and so he's writing that because he's been doing Robin for 10 years.
Yep. And they brought him in to introduce Tim Drake, and so he did those two events. He did Batman Year 3 and then The Lonely Place of Dying as bookends.
Yeah.
And to introduce Tim Drake. But yeah, and thanks to the Real Mob for comic books. Yes. this is true. So, it's amazing how money laundering can actually create art. Who knew? So anyway, that was the story, and I definitely want to go back and look at Long Halloween and then see how it fits in the thing, but it felt a little bit, and tell me if I'm off base in here. I'm not trying to be rude, but you would know if I'm right, Hutch. It felt like fan fiction.
Yes, a lot of this did.
Yeah.
It just felt too much like a fan of the Long Halloween and is trying to tie this all in with it. And it's like I said, the second half just falls apart.
Yeah.
So
first half's solid, and I would say so. So for my take is it good or is it trash? My thing is that I think the first half it's not amazing, but it's good enough that I'm glad I read the piece. But I didn't want to be the only one that read it, so I conned everyone else, and I conned these guys into reading it too, so we can talk about it.
The art is really good. The art is really good. I got to say that. Jesus says Is that how you say it? Saiz?
Jesus says, I think it says, but I don't know.
It's really good. I love his artwork on this. I
We
like.
ain't tight like that. So, okay. Now
There
we're
is one thing I
already.
want
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cartoonicus.
Go ahead.
and that is, I'm not sure if this is an elephant in the room or if I just was the only one who thought about this, but I noticed the whole time how they kept splitting the dialogue from Harvey's side to Two-Face's side, and you get this ugly green, monstrous text on the other side.
Am
I
I
crazy?
guess I didn't really think about that.
No, I noticed that. I don't know that it was
Yeah.
consistent all the time, but
Well,
yeah,
he'd go back and forth, and I couldn't help wondering, were they trying to tell us that he had a double personality? These are literally two different peoples here.
both the books are saying that he's a split personality, and I don't really care for that, quite frankly. I think he's a guy who has been hurt, and when he starts saying "we" like Tommy Lee Jones did in the movie, I just don't care for that. And it's like, yeah, it's like it's not too. It's a. I don't know. He still thinks of himself as one person. I think it's just he recognizes that he has a split. Not a split. There's a duality to him.
It would make sense for thematically, though. I think that role is already taken up with the ventriloquist.
Well, and Two-Face predates the ventriloquist, but
yeah, but I think ventriloquist does it better.
Yep.
And that was, oh man, I shouldn't say this. I when I was trying to get into DC, we were told to never pitch Batman stories. You're never going to get Batman. And then a friend of ours actually was like, asked if she had a Batman story. And it was like, oh, so you probably should have a Batman story in mind if you're going to, just in case you get asked. Because this is just one of my friends who she wasn't even trying to do Batman, but somebody asked. And I had a story where the ventriloquist, the ventriloquist, not the dummy, just the ventriloquist, goes to Harvey Dent, or Harvey Bullock, and says, I am so sick of working for that guy. I'm going to give you everything you have on him, but I want complete immunity. And Harvey Bullock's like, love of heaven, I don't know what to do.
That is funny.
Because he's such an abused character. He says, I hate that guy. He's so mean to me. when ventriloquist is written right, he's a very fun character. That's why they did kill him off, and I was glad that they brought him back, because he's too good a character, and you can do so many things with him,
Well, and the same thing happened with Mr. Freeze too. In the second Robin miniseries, Chuck killed off Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, as a joke.
As a joke, and it's funny but shocking. It's one of the times I actually wrote in to say, like, what are you doing? Mr. Freeze has got a lot of potential. And
he was in his superpowers awful outfit.
Oh yeah.
And Joker just shoots him and dumps his body.
Yeah, and then they brought him back, and I think in a pretty clever way too, in the way that didn't hurt it that Chuck story. And I was just getting into comics then, pretty much, so I hadn't really found Chuck's voice specifically as a writer, so I wouldn't know what to make of it. But
wasn't he the one who brought him back too?
I think that he may have had him bring him back, but the reason they did is because of the animated series.
Yeah,
when they went through in the animated series and gave him that super compelling origin story, DC was just like, no, go fish him out of the drink. You figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think
they found a way to make him interesting. Yeah, because he wasn't. He was really all played out. And
I think he could have been interesting. And that's 13-year-old me or 11-year-old me or whatever it was like, oh, this could have been really interesting. You just gotta get the right person behind it. You don't need to just kill him just cause. And that's one thing. Like you're talking about. Well, that's like
Because
something you were talking about, Cartoonicus, is that like I don't want to read superhero books just to watch everybody get killed, and even I definitely agree. I think there are
Well, see, I don't
time
want to
and
read
place for
superhero
it.
books to watch a million innocent people get killed and their murderers never face the. Mm.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a fair point too.
I'm
Well,
too
let's
tired of that. The Joker is the one who pushes that to the limit,
Oh,
That
certainly.
was
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think there could be room in a mythos for like one character that's kind of like that gives you that intensity, and like the Joker why Harley Quinn should not be a regular character, because the
Yeah.
Joker should come out of the box once a year, and then you put him back in a box, you don't touch him again, and
Yeah.
nobody should touch him again, because you're dealing with those kind of stakes, and I think that those stakes work as long as you don't play with toys all the time. But when you have a Harley Quinn in an ongoing series, and it's going to tie into that, then the Joker becomes meaningless. And that's why in the New 52 they had the whole rotting face mask Joker, just to try to restore some of the terror that the Joker is supposed to have, because they wouldn't keep him in his freaking box.
Yeah. Hey, I need to ask Cartoonicus, have you ever read Devil's Advocate, the Joker
Don't think
story?
so.
Oh, that's
You
really good.
need to read Devil's Advocate, because it concerns the U.S. Postal Service having stamps that have Joker venom on the back, and because it's a federal crime, he is suddenly eligible for the death penalty, and and the problem is that Batman does not
Killing,
think the Joker
400
did it.
people doesn't do that, of course.
Right, but it's a federal crime, and so and the problem is that Batman does not think that the Joker is doing it, and he's actually has to go to bat to
Oh.
keep him from being killed, because he's not actually the guy who did this crime.
Yeah, it's really good, and
It is a good story.
what we ought to do is we ought to pull that out sometime next month and have have that as it.
That story has never been reprinted.
Yeah,
It's awesome, and
amazing.
it's just
It's really good. It's not the best Batman story I did, but it is
No.
a solid mystery, and that's one thing. Like a lot of Batman stories are not solid mysteries, and that one really is. So
Yeah, and also the Joker did send a missile towards New York, and that was in Birds of Prey, and Power Girl stopped the missile, and Oracle, who of course is crippled because of the Joker, actually got to tell him, by the way, you've gone on to a whole new level here. People who send missiles at cities do not get to go back to Arkham Asylum anymore. And he was sent off to the slab, and that led into his Joker miniseries. But
yeah, that sounds fun.
it's
Okay.
like, why was he ever put back in Arkham Asylum? Quite frankly, that didn't stop being the
Thank
case.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, and once again, there are some things that have to happen, so we have a movie.
That's right. So we still have a Joker around. Yeah.
So we have that around. Okay, now let's go ahead and change gears entirely and try to blaze through the Batman annual a little bit.
I don't have as much to say about it, so this.
And part of the thing too is there's also it's a shorter story. It's more condensed. Published in 1990, so we'll go with that. So this we're not going to hit this a lot. We are going to, and I do agree that Ethereal Dragon is right. Random people would be shooting the Joker in the real world.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People would be just showing up. Would be open carrying in cities that allow that, and he would just be killed.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the segment here, this visual segment where you've got these black things and you've got coin flipping going on with just hands. You've got two lines of dialogue that are happening. This is a routine thematic visual aspect within this comic. And it works really, really well. So it works really, really well on here. And it's called The Eye of the Beholder is the story. It's written by Andrew Helfer, who I swear I know that name and cannot think of who it is for the life of me. And I did not look it up. I was very busy today.
Andy Helfer was like the editor on Justice League.
Okay.
I want to say that he went on to be like an editor on or he was already an editor on Justice League, but he's also a writer. But I think you'd probably know him more as an editor.
Could be. Could definitely be. So one of the routine things also, we've got Harvey and his wife Gilda, and Harvey's going through some stuff. And Gilda in this version, and I don't remember, I always remember this up until Long Halloween, where Gilda, absolute saint, never depicted anything other than just being an absolute saint. And this story really doubles down on her being just this perfectly kind, reasonable, stable woman. And the also one thing I got to comment on here, we got this thing in the Batcave. Alfred says, "Really, Master Bruce, how long has it been since you washed that outfit? Even if you intend to be a creature of the night, there's no reason you should smell like one." And then it says, "Sorry, Alfred, I'm on my way out." That's funny, except I don't believe it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't even make sense. Batman, I mean, wouldn't want to be smelly because then he couldn't sneak up on people.
Yeah. It's the introduction of the acerbic Alfred that's the Frank Miller thing. He introduced that he's got this biting charm wit, that Alfred has, and he's always making little asides and comments. You'll have to wear it wet, and that started in the Dark Knight Returns. Well, it was called the Dark Knight at the time, and then the Year One, of course. So it's just pretty much, that's a big change that he brought to Batman, was that Alfred
it is not
has
fair to give me something to like about Frank Miller's changes.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So we set up this element within the first act of the story, which is where there is a Commissioner Gordon. There are 3 narrative voices in this book as well. There's Bruce, there is Harvey, and there is Jim Gordon, right? So and I think that the narrative, guys, was the narrative or not handled amazing in this book. Like, I wanted to try to read through it quick, to speed through it, but the internal monologue and the way they balanced it between these 3 narrators was so engaging that I found myself going back and reading sections just to read them again.
Yeah. I do think that this does an amazingly good job of being tied in and continuing the Year One, the Frank Miller's Year One, the whole aesthetic, without having the same. It's not Mazzucchelli doing the art, but it is very much in the same tone, and you could put them together and they would work. Whereas the other one, being related to Long Halloween, is more fanficky, as you said. This is intended
far more comprehensive. I could understand what was going on. I could appreciate the characterization, and it was very interesting to see where, like, a lot of the movie was clearly taking, in some cases, actual shots and ideas from.
Yep.
You mean the 1989 movie?
No, the Dark Knight.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's it. I guess I hadn't picked up on that. Oh, I do want to go ahead and shout out one quick thing. We're talking about the palette and the colors in here. It's Adrian Waugh, who was an absolute standard of the time for colorists. And I don't know if that's the way Adrian pronounces the last name. I'm not even sure Adrian's gender. I have no idea. I've it could be a man or a woman's name spelled that way. And don't know if they pronounce it Roy or Wah, but there you have it. So I'm sure that, if Jim is still watching, he can tell me how wrong I am. So
go ahead. I have nothing more to say.
Okay, no, I was just checking out.
Oh, you're waiting for the.
Oh, gotcha.
Because there's some fun stuff going on in the chat. I just wanted to check in on it, see if anything needed my advice or people talking amongst themselves.
I
Not my
think
bad
Adrienne. I think Adrienne with an E at the end, 2 N's and an E. I think that's a female name. I've always taken it as
It
that,
could be.
and I think it's Roy, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah,
R-O-Y?
yeah. The word Roy, like in French, it's roi.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
I only know that because when I was a lad living in Denver, and I can't remember the fellow's name right now, but the Wah was a goalie for the Avalanche when I was living down there. I can't remember his first name right now. It's escaping me. But yeah, so that's how I learned how to. Yeah,
She was a female, and
okay.
she died 14 years ago. Wow, I did not know that.
Well, she was an amazing colorist, and I wanted to take
Yeah.
the time to point that out. So, okay. So the other thing that in the first act of the story, there is a big plot point where they're dealing with a serial killer, and you have one of probably the most graphic pages in a Batman comic of the time.
Yeah,
And it's
very
quite
true.
it's very quite something. You've got the naked dude, you've got the blood spatter, you've got the trail of blood, the whole thing. And this fellow here is and they mention it up here, talk about it, introduce it, and this guy's a serial killer who's killing old people in old folks' homes. Batman chases him down, confronts him. The guy confesses the whole business because nobody's going to believe a man dressed as a bat in a bat costume. And the cops show up and take the guy to jail. And sure enough, here's Harvey Dent in court. Now, like,
The first. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you were going to say?
I was going to say the first thing that made me think of was the most recent The Batman movie, where he takes off his lens and it has everything that he's seen for the day recorded on it, and I'm like, that's why Batman needs that.
Yeah, but even then it wouldn't
That's
necessarily
good.
be admissible. That's the issue that
True.
they're having with this whole thing. But no, here's the ticket. In the last book, right? They set up the stakes. They're talking about the mob fight. They're tying it into this other event. And while I enjoyed it, it didn't pull me into the stakes of the story, right?
Mhm.
Why does it matter so much this case, right? It's just because it's in that almost passe. We got to clean up Gotham trend that's in all media dealing with the early times of Batman anymore. Whether it's Gotham, the TV show, whether it's the Dark Knight, whether it's whatever, we got to clean up Gotham, and that's just that generic screed, and it's fine, and I enjoy that kind of aspect, and the whole Untouchables team was fun, but in this one, it got its claws into me, right?
Mhm.
And then when you realize that because Batman can't testify, because this guy he's not leaving physical evidence behind at his scenes, right? Because whatever he's got, you see that in Batman's narrative here, you feel sorry for Harvey. Harvey's got a circumstantial case. It's not pulling together really well, and it makes it personal, even though Harvey hasn't had a lot of time on the screen. Like they say, right? They say, "Show don't tell."
Mhm.
But I'm telling that here's part of the thing is because of how it's being told and the way that there's a lot of words on this page, but the way it intersects with the art, like I felt like I was watching it happen, right? Like I was invested in it in ways, and like I said, there were some of these sections that I went back and reread captions just because this writing is so good.
Yeah.
And so when they say show don't tell, I'm like, the telling is part of the showing in this case.
Yeah, show don't tell isn't necessarily about literally not talking. It's about
Right.
demonstrating rather than droning
Yeah.
on and on with exposition.
Make you in it and feeling it is better than telling you about what happened. I will
Right.
point out that both this one and the other one, the other story, both had things where Batman's
involvement as a vigilante is the problem with the case. You know, that they're trying to figure out, how do we get Batman to, you know, bring us stuff that can actually go through a trial and end in imprisonment. And I did think that was it was a little overblown in the other one, the 2008 story, because Gordon goes to great lengths to say Batman will not be involved in this when they go to arrest Maroni, but then one of the people almost dies and Batman like breaks through a window, stops somebody, and then the whole case falls apart because Batman was involved. It's like, he didn't beat up Maroni. It's not, and his guys were opening up with machine guns on the cops. I should think you've got a pretty good case right there.
Whatever happened to a citizen's arrest?
That's true too, but
Well,
I found it unbelievable in the 2008 version that Batman's mere presence, having burst in at one point and saved somebody, dooms the case, especially when you've got his guys opening up on cops who are serving a warrant. You know, that just it seems unbelievable. Except you can always say, oh, you know, they bought the jury, you know, nobody's innocent in Gotham, etc., sort of stuff. But really, you should be able to get away from captions in a comic book. I think there's actually even thought balloons.
Oh yeah, this one does have thought balloons, and anyway, so moving along.
Yes.
Basically, there's this. Oh yeah, definitely for sure. There's this great scene between Gordon and Batman where they're talking about vigilante justice and limitations to the idea, and is it really justice if you go out killing people, even if they need killed, right? And it's a fun little philosophic perspective about justice and about moral codes, and it's very, very comic booky. I'm not trying to get into all of that here. Obviously, in the chat earlier, people were talking about the idea that, you know, in a real world, people would be gunning down the Joker, right? There's no way somebody would be like, I'll do life in prison to stop that guy from killing another 100 people, right? Definitely. So we're leaving the reality of it outside for the sake of the myth, right? So, but it's a great little scene, and then we have at the trial, the case, of course, falls apart, and people are raced into the judge's chambers, and who does Harvey find in the judge's chambers but the killer, right? And the killer basically just confesses to Harvey because, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that would, like, this is the one plot hole, I think, in this story that I was able to pick out and be like, if you just say that, like, you're still under, I mean, like, you were.
And I would have gotten away if it weren't for you meddling kids.
Could you just say that a little louder? Pulled it out of his pocket, you know. They had many tape recorders.
Where it's like, you're still under oath, man. Just because their thing erupted, you're not like released from being under oath if you're in front of the prosecutor. It's like you just confess to the prosecutor. It's like, I mean, I know it's your word against his, but you still said it, man. Dude's an officer of the court. Anyway, so this whole bit is there because what we have is that we have this plot point where this man puts this idea in Harvey's head, where basically I'm a killer because I'm a psycho and I like killing people, but I function in the real world because I've disassociated my violent urges from my daily behaviors. And so evil little Rudy goes and kills people, and then mature and stable Rudolph is the respected doctor in the community. And I've bifurcated these aspects of my personality. And I get away with it because I don't mix business with personal. When I go to kill people, I do that in places where it's not it's not part of my business, it's not part of my life. And so there's nothing to tie it back to me. I just keep these parts of my life entirely separate. Right. And so you have this idea of this split personality as a foil, right?
We all know where this is going.
What did he do to Harvey there?
Well, I don't think he did anything.
Belly?
I think the idea is that Harvey's so unnerved by all of it, and that he becomes sickened, right? And because one of the things we have from that first scene, if you recall, when they're doing the dream sequence and there's that coin flipping, is we find out from talking to Gilda and Harvey that Harvey went to see his father, and that there's some sort of emotional hang up from his childhood that they're dealing with.
Mhm.
I'm gonna spoil this part of it for those listening at home. Basically, there's this, because it's relayed throughout the course of the story that Harvey's father was a drunkard, and he was a violent drunkard, and he would beat Harvey almost every night when he was young, and he would play a game where if he would flip a coin, and if Harvey would always be tails, and if Harvey lost, he'd get smacked around. And if Harvey won, he wouldn't, but he couldn't win because the game's rigged. And what had happened is that Harvey had just found out as an older man that his dad was playing with a double-headed coin. And so Harvey had been dealing with the PTSD from this constant abuse for his whole life, and had finally gotten himself under control. And then when the nursing home murders started happening, he's like, man, I really should connect with my dad. And then his dad let him in on the secret that it was a double-headed coin, because his dad was a con man and a drunkard. And so then that's what caused Harvey to snap and to reemerge with all this trauma from his past, was because he found out that his dad had taken all free will away from him by rigging the game. Right? That idea that he could have been saved was a hope that had kept any kind of sense of self-empowerment over Harvey. And that was the whole thing. So anyway, and but that is piecemealed, and I think done really well, like little breadcrumbs through the whole story to get to that point about the end of it. So so the killer gets out of jail, goes on with his life. He gets a phone call one night. Who is it? I have taken your advice. And the advice, of course, is that you ought to split yourself into two people because it's a better way to live, right? And the killer says, Dent, is that you? Speak to me. And then, boom, guy's whole house blows up, right? And then that's the last time that's sort of mentioned. So
That is weird.
Yeah. I mean, I think it gets one mention at the very end of the last chapter that he basically cops to it, but or the last act. The mayor tells Harvey he should take a vacation and hang out with his wife, and we're introduced to the mayor's, or to Harvey's wormy sidekick, right? Klemper. No, Klemper was the guy's name. Fields. What's his name? Fields yeah. Is the guy's last name. I can't remember if what the first name is, but it's not Vernon Fields. It's something else.
It's weird how he looks. He looks exactly the same, but he's got a different name.
The same, yeah. It's nuts. Hang on, Adrian Fields.
Yeah,
it's Adrian Fields. But yeah, that's the weirdest thing. It looks exactly the same as Vernon What's His Bucket from the other book, but it's clearly
so why
not.
did they change it? He's even the same person who supplies the acid in both scenarios. So
it's crazy. So Harvey's having a hard time of things. He's feeling unhinged. He just lost this big case, and Gordon has the great, brilliant, happy idea. And Gordon's idea is to get his two friends together so they can start swapping notes. And and the whole Batman Dent alliance is Gordon's idea in this, right? Because basically what they say is that the evidence you're bringing is tainted because you're bringing it. You need to find a way to catch these guys and preserve the evidence trail so it doesn't look like you're the one who's got the evidence, so it's not still admissible in court. And criminals getting tied up by you, maybe you weren't there. Who can say? Or that the chain of evidence that is left behind is not affected by the apprehension of the criminals in any way. So that's the whole business, right?
Yeah, and they do know each other because Batman and Harvey Dent were like working together in Batman Year One, the Frank Miller miniseries. So, yes, I'm glad he mentions that. I know him, but they didn't keep working together apparently,
right? Or they weren't keeping close contact together,
right?
And so Harvey basically gives Batman his own personal phone number so that they can go ahead and before he makes a bust, He said, here's the thing is well, you've got a choice then. You can bide your time and wait for the right moment, or you can bust some heads for the sheer hell of it. You decide. It's like the difference between a hobby and a job. So now part two. Gordon reminisces how Batman and Harvey Dent are putting everybody away, and their ratio of cases tried to cases won is ridiculous, better than the cops. And the simple truth is, I'm just jealous. And I got to tell you, man, this panel, I love this panel so. Whoa, man, what the heck? Computer, sorry. I'll find it again.
Keep going.
Almost there.
Yeah, you gotta go. Keep going.
There we are. I love this panel. This is one of those perfect panels. And of course, it is one of Wally Wood's panels that always work. But additionally to that, I mean, just like the expression, the face, the whole thing. I mean, that is 100% pure comics. I absolutely love that. Here we go. Question in the chat. The did aspect of Two-Face can't really be used too much. Oh, the DID, the socio identity disorder aspect of Two-Face can't be used too much due to the structure of Batman. Agree or disagree? I think Hutch is of the opinion that actually having the DID is an unnecessary, superfluous aspect to the character's identity. I'm not sure. I think it can be good, but I don't like the idea about Two-Face ever being innocent. No, I don't like the idea about any of him being innocent. I can get around the idea about there being two Harveys, but I think one Harvey is an excuse for the other Harvey to be violent in the same way that like the original Jekyll and Hyde, right? Where Hyde is the excuse Jekyll uses to let Jekyll act sinful, and then he finds himself taken over by his sinful impulses.
Right.
And Alan Moore talked about the same thing in League, but to more he really exaggerated the size of all of that. But even in Stevenson's original, that's an aspect.
Yeah.
So I think that Harvey Two-Face is the tool by which Harvey Dent gets what he wants. That's my take on it. I think there could be some conflict in
we see
Harvey
some flashbacks coming up that clearly show that.
Right.
I mean, not flashbacks, but they're like, in Harvey's mind.
So, okay, this is a plot point here. We're going to say this. There was somebody that Harvey is mad because he was supposed to be given a huge bail of $500,000, and he only put it in for $50,000. He dropped a few zeros, and so Fields is kicked out of the office, and because this guy's going out there. Then Harvey suggests that Batman plant evidence, and Batman says, "No, we don't plant evidence. That's what the bad guys do." And Harvey says, "Fine. Why don't you kill him?" Okay, I said there's one plot hole earlier. I think this might be another when I think about it, because if you're dealing with somebody who has a moral objection to planting evidence, he probably also has a moral objection to killing somebody, because planting evidence is less bad.
Yes.
I could actually see Batman planting evidence.
Well, what I can see
Just
Batman
saying.
doing is unhiding evidence. I don't see Batman planting evidence. I see Batman unhiding evidence, because it's like, oh, the cocaine was in the drawer. Well, I guess you shouldn't have left it on the counter then. So,
yeah, I don't really like this scene because I really like Harvey Dent being an actual good DA who doesn't have the inclination to cheat to win a case, and that the
what I always liked about his classic breakdown before this 1990 version was that basically he did everything right. He's made himself a good person. He's been a good person. He looks handsome. He's got a wife. He's got the job, and then he gets his side of the face destroyed, and his whole life goes to crap. And it's the basically why do bad things happen to good people type of thing. He's no longer beautiful. He's in fact hideous on one side. And so he has this, it's like you look at this side, he's gorgeous. This side, he's a monster, and it causes him to have a breakdown, not a split personality, but just he's he entertains dark thoughts now. And if he's entertaining dark thoughts and he's not split, it's a different take. I know they're going for more of a split personality thing, but I like the more classic explanation for Harvey Dent.
And I can actually see some sense even within the story with that idea about Harvey being an honest. I mean, it's obviously not portrayed here, but if they had done the idea where he's an honest investigator and still having killed the serial killer, because the serial killer confessed, and they can't bring him up on charges again because of double jeopardy, right? And so that's a situation where the guy's definitely guilty, and he knows he's guilty, and so I think you can make a justification for that in a way where you're still not wanting to cheat in the trial. We're still an honest dealer in that, and yet this man has to die. I can see that as a justification. Tank says earlier, I guess I'm missing something. Is the captions in comics different than captions in tech? Accessibility. No, the issue is that what we were talking more about is that in older comics, in some older comics, they were definitely overused, but descriptive captions for internal dialogue or for narratives were very, very common. And then through the course of the 80s and 90s, they became less and less common, and all narrative captions were replaced with internal monologue captions, or they were done away with entirely. And there was a theory within comics creation and comic studies that the art itself should do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to the internal lives of the characters. However, I know Hutch and I, at least, I'm not sure where Cartoonicus fills in on this, and but I know Hutch and I, we think that narrative can function as well as any other storytelling technique in comics. It just has to be used correctly. And I think this story does a great job. And even though many of the captions are internal monologues, because we're dealing with different points of view and perspectives, I think it and the nature of Batman's thoughts are not just what he's thinking in the moment, but they seem to be more circumspect in a lot of that. And I think it does a great job of telling the story through narrative, in a way, through narration, I should say, in a way that a lot of modern comics miss because they just don't even use that tool. So, any other thoughts on that question before we move on, guys?
About captions?
Captions, yep.
I just miss the, meanwhile at the Hall of Justice type stuff. The simple intro. It's like they've been done away with to the point that, where there would be some benefit to just saying, meanwhile, we've changed our location. I mean, how many times have we been talking about the Superman stories? We're kind of lost. It's like, oh, wait, this is back on Brainiac's ship. Okay. I didn't get that. This is at Superman HQ, but that one's at the hospital. Okay. It's like they've done away with captions to the point that it's kind of unmooring sometimes. It's like, it would really be helpful to have that. But the Stan Lee type of intro, greetings, fellow viewers, look what we've got in a big, long, verbose, show-offy intros. I don't miss those so much. But I mean, except for the, they were pretty cool when Stan Lee was doing them, but some of them were really awful, So, yeah, I don't miss all narration in comic books, because some of it was like, just, get how far are we into this narration? You haven't said anything meaningful. This is all build up. Just get with the story already. But yeah, I liked this story. You were talking about like how thought balloons became captions. That's kind of what's going on here.
Yeah,
It's an early case of it, really. Yeah.
Well, and I think the thing that separates it from feeling that entirely is that we've got multiple narrators, and so we get the perspective of these three different men as they're going through this story, and I think that gives it a broader, more narrative function than just, like in Batman Year One, it's basically just you're just seeing Batman's thoughts, and it's effective for that story, but it is still somewhat limiting the genre of the way it takes in and the way it can use that function. And I think this is broader and it becomes more storytelling than just in a broader way, if I can say.
By the way, they even show Barbara and James, his wife and his child, in here as follow up to year one, and then they kind of disappeared into history and never were mentioned again. And yeah. I mean, every now and then there's an explanation that like James is dead or something like that, but this kind of wrecked Barbara Gordon, the girl, Batgirl, having an backstory, because he's way too young to be her father, and they had to bring in that she was his uncle, but she called him dad, and that whole stuff was so bad. And then they kind of quietly did away with Year One, at least parts of it, that they actually put Barbara back in and made him a little older, and so it isn't quite in continuity anymore, just to have them be, because that's right, she should be his daughter, and he could be 10 years older and it wouldn't be a problem.
I agree.
So anyway,
okay, so we are. So basically, trying to skip along a little bit. Here we have the scene where Pencil Neck Dweeb and because he's the same model. It's Adrian. What's his name? He's meeting with Maroni for reasons. He's the DA's sidekick, and basically saying, "Hey, look, we got to come up with some sort of plan to deal with Dent, and the plan is going to be." And this is actually Dent's interviewing this guy and Mr. Maroni, and he wants he's actually fascinating about not fascinating, fantasizing.
Yeah, fantasizing
about killing him, and he brings Maroni up there. He's gonna go ahead and he's like, "Oh man, I got this antacid. It's real bad." And oh my goodness, he throws it on his face just like we have there before. And here Maroni's gunned down in the court because he's threatening the bailiffs with more acid, and he's gunned down. And I don't remember that in any other.
This is a big change from the traditionally. Batman was also there to testify. Back in 1942, Batman's just in court in costume, ready to testify, and he's the one who blocks the acid or kind of gets it to one side of his face. They took that aspect out, although they do have him there in disguise. But in what was it, Batman Forever, the third movie, why it wasn't they got the names wrong. It should be Batman and Robin, and the fourth one should be Batman Forever. But Batman Forever, they actually had Val Kilmer in the trial jumping forward trying to intercept the acid, and they actually kept that in continuity for the movie, and it looks as silly as as there's a reason why they didn't do this in the 1990 retelling of the story, because Batman wouldn't be in the courtroom.
Now this also threw me off here. We have it's in the hospital, and you've got Mrs. Dent, and I did not pick up on this in the earlier things. Mrs. Dent is called Grace here instead of Gilda.
Oh yeah, that's why I was wondering who she was.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure it out.
Okay.
The other thing is that the coin, it mentions was damaged by the acid and not by an act of Harvey, and that's I thought was interesting too, because I'd always I guess I hadn't realized that there was a story where he did not mess the coin up himself.
Yeah.
So,
what does acid do to a coin?
Well, it depends the kind of acid. A lot of acids do nothing to metal.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends on what kind of metal it is. Hydrochloric acid will eat away at some metals. I don't know that it will silver though.
Yeah.
And so it just depends. Muriatic acid will not.
But it wouldn't mar it like in the form of scratches or anything.
No. It would start to melt it if it did anything to it, I would think.
It just doesn't work, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Organic acid.
Well, maybe that's the deal. If an acid is strong enough to melt through a coin, maybe it was supposed to kill him.
Yeah. Could be, but who knows? Anyway.
I prefer green Harvey over red Harvey. I realize they probably did that way back when, because purple or red would look like blood. And
I grew up on blue Harvey, so
blue Harvey.
Oh yeah, from the animated series.
Oh, okay.
He's got like a blue-green color to him.
Okay.
A little pinch there, but yeah. So I also prefer green Harvey. In fact, when they had the very purpley pink Harvey from the movie Batman Forever, I felt that it was really garish and distracting.
Yeah.
Which seems like a weird complaint for a child to have when you're dealing with a man whose half of his face has been eaten with acid. But that is how I felt. So there you go.
Honestly, I do have to say, I thought no design has ever been better than what they pulled off in The Dark Knight. That was masterful.
Yeah. Well, they actually made it like lower than the level of his skin, but that was amazing. That's what you can do with CGI. Have either of you seen the new Batman animated series that they dumped on Amazon?
No, I did not.
That storyline, the storyline does focus on, or at least toward the last 2 episodes are all about Harvey Dent becoming Two-Face, although they never call him that. And you don't have any intention to watch it, do you? It's not good.
No,
okay.
I don't have
They actually kill him off. They have him become Harvey, they have him sort of, I don't know, it's like there's just some scars, like black scars, and he goes around killing a bunch of people and then he dies, and it's terrible. It's really terrible. Aside from the voice casting of it, and they have him be not a very good character. He's pompous and egotistical, and he's not a good person, and so I don't know. It's not a. I don't think it's very good.
Harvey, isn't it?
Harvey, yes, but yeah. So the big problem I have with Harvey Dent is that he's pretty much aligned towards evil, and so when he chooses the good side, it mainly keeps him from actually killing you today or right now. But it's like it doesn't make him like put the guy in a ambulance and make sure that he's okay. It's like, you know what I mean? There's not a lot of good on his good side, and I don't know, that's just that's neither here nor there. It's not really related to what's happening on the page. So we'll go back to the story. Sorry.
So basically, as he's recovering, he has a chance to escape. He gets himself a gun. He's going to kill Adrian here, the wormy guy, and Batman intervenes, and he tries to he knocks Batman out. Can't find his coin. He runs off. Batman's got the coin under the thing. He goes, talks to the wife. I'm really blazing through here, and the wife says that he got this 2-headed coin from his father. Well, where is his father? Oh, he's in this slum house downtown. So Harvey goes in, starts killing the guard there. He meets his dad. He gives this whole speech we're talking about earlier, and it's, I gotta say, they do such a fun job of building up the tension for this last scene. There's the action lines, the coin flip, and there it is, good side up. Harvey doesn't kill his dad, right? So he ends up being epilogue. taken to a mental hospital for the criminally insane, the whole business. They fix his face. Harvey's trying to get on with himself, and then you have this voice of bad Harv in the mirror. And long story short, he scars his own face up with his hand.
Which is, yeah, he did have in the comics, he appeared in 1942, and then Batman pays to have his face like get reconstructive surgery, and then I forget how many years he was out of commission before. I want to say it was a decade or two before they brought him back. And there was an explosion, like he goes to stop somebody in a burning house, and there's an explosion, and it blows the reconstructed face off, and he can't be put back together again. And it's so that whole, this might be kind of a reference that he does get plastic surgery, but yeah, he destroys it because he knows he's still bad.
Is the man on the inside
Yeah.
hadn't healed yet. And that's actually making a point of it that, that fixing the outside step 1 and then fixing the inside step 2, and he'll be stuck in here until then. So
Yeah.
But yeah, so overall, what do we think about this, guys? What are our thoughts on this book on it in itself, and then we'll talk about comparing it to the other. We have kind of throughout already cheated on that, but
yeah. Well, once again, this is something where the if you really want to see it done right, you go to Batman the Animated Series. That is one of the best written origin stories I've seen. You've seen the one.
Oh, yeah.
The moment where
Bull from Night Court.
right, and they actually do build on this whole thing where he's got the split personality. He's had a psychiatric background. He's been seeing a psychiatrist, and his bad guy gets a hold of it and is threatening to ruin him with that. And Harvey Dent breaks down, and then he just relaxes and walks up and says, "There's just one problem. You're talking to the wrong Harvey." And it's like, oh my gosh, I was like 25 when that aired, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is creepy. I can't imagine a little kid watching this.
Yep. That was intense.
It's very well done, so much better than anywhere else. But it does build on this story, the aspects of the story. Maybe not the specifics of the child abuse, but I would say this was a very pivotal story. It is very well done compared to the 2008 one, which just kind of falls apart. It has some good aspects to it, but it falls apart. Well, and this one holds together very well.
Yeah.
As a story.
Cartoonicus, what are your thoughts? Because you read this one much quicker.
Very quickly. Yes. Even so, it was, like I said, it was way more comprehensive than the previous one. Yeah. And I could actually break it down artistically. I could see the strategies being used to convey things visually. It's, older and thus cheaper, so there's nothing particularly impressive about the artwork like a whole, but as far as the actual sequential art, I do think it was done very well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I mean artistically, like I said, I love the color work on this, and it's one of those things where I mean part of it's nostalgia. I'm sure I grew up reading newspaper comics, but when they're right, they're just right on, and I just really like that. The other thing about it that I really enjoyed. I thought that the story as a whole, it had a lot going on. It dealt with a lot of different categories of stuff, but I felt like each piece built onto and added to the other pieces in a way where I felt like the 2008 story was distracted by all of the different plot threads. I felt like this did a good job of tying them together. Even the original, that first part of the story that doesn't seem to connect to the second part of the second and third parts in terms of the plot, it still sets up aspects and is reflected back to aspects where we're seeing the descent of Harvey Dent. And I think they did a good job of using those things to keep all these pieces in place. while not overburdening the story with too many side characters. I think they did a really good job of using just enough of the texture on that. I really enjoyed it. The other thing that I thought about I can't remember what the other thing was. Drat, it was in my head and it left.
Ooh.
I will say that both stories are available for sale on Amazon through the digital store as well as well, I think I can't remember. I can't remember if I saw any of the vendors that are selling copies on there or not, but I do know there were digitals. So, but yeah, as compared to the other thing is it's almost half the length, and the funny thing is even though it's half the length, I feel like it told more story. It was compressed.
Yeah.
It was better compressed, I think.
As you often get with older comics.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's well worthy the place of how well that story was remembered. So, for a long time, and I think it should be remembered today. So, well, I think that is everything we were going to hit on today. And I'm trying to remember if we have discussed next week's show or not.
If we have, I don't remember.
I can't recall. It's been a weird summer for me. I'm still catching up to things again. So, if it wasn't 12 issues, I'd say we ought to tuck into Long Halloween. But I don't. I know I'm not going to have. Oh, hey, Twitless is in the chat.
Oh.
He says Hutch summed up my thoughts almost exactly.
Thank you.
Still, yeah. And Batman Annual feels like it tells twice as much story in half the page length, which I just said too.
Yeah.
So,
as much as we could do the Long Halloween, because it's been ages since I read it, I could stand to reread it, and I know I have it. I also have Dark Victory, which you were talking about how Long Halloween kind of replaces year 2. Dark Victory is kind of a replacement for year 3 because it shows Dick Grayson coming to live. And I love how he's like, it shows him like doing handstands on top of the mansion and stuff like that. It's like, it plays up the thing of this kid being an acrobat, a natural acrobat who's just, parkour is like how he lives.
yeah.
And, yeah.
Here's the crazy thing is I bought the trade for Dark Victory. I know I have read it. I don't remember anything about it.
That's all I can remember of it too.
Yeah. So that's like one of my things. Like one thing that I would like to do one of these days is to set up the time to sit down and read year 1 and Long Halloween and Dark Victory like in close succession. And kind of get into that headspace. And I remember a lot of the plot of Long Halloween, but not a lot of the details in it. So that's one thing I really want to kind of go back and revisit that one of these days. But I don't know exactly when that's going to happen.
they turned it into a 2-part movie too, and I've only seen the first part.
Long Halloween?
Yeah. I don't think every good comic needs to be turned into a movie.
I would agree.
Having said that, I really think that I have a hard time remembering Joker Devil's Advocate. I really think that one really deserves to be adapted. It's okay. It works as a good story.
No, I agree. I think that one would be really fun.
That's one of the few things that I wrote to Chuck, and he actually answered on his Ask Chuck Dixon things. And I said, why isn't this a movie? And he said, it's a matter of you need to be at DC advocating for it. That's why all the most recent stuff, regardless of its quality of being like a timeless story or not, gets adapted because people are there pushing for it to be made
Yeah.
into a movie.
Speaking of which, I know that I am I have very it's pretty well known that I have very mixed feelings about Jeff Johns.
Mhm.
And I mostly enjoyed the first Shazam movie, even though the material that it was adapting was horrible, 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 absolute garbage. I mostly enjoyed the first movie. I watched the second movie over the weekend. Well, because you were talking, Hutch, at one point about doing like a set of shows about talking about the DC movies.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I want to be on Hutch's show because Hutch has always been on my show, and I appreciate that. And so I want to check this out. So I started watching some of those more recent DC movies that I could get for cheap or get from the library. And I watched James Gunn's Suicide Squad and hated it. And I watched the Shazam, the Fury of the Gods. Man, there were parts that I really liked about that movie, and there were parts of that movie I just couldn't stand.
Most
Like-
of the movie is just terrible.
That's how I felt about the first one.
But
See,
the best
the
part of that second movie is where he's getting battered around on the street. And remember, he still has not picked out a name. You remember they were always calling him Captain Twinkle Fingers or something like that.
Right.
And
Like, yeah,
he gets smacked down, and somebody on the street says, "Way to go, Captain Marvel." He says, "That's not my name." The guy who said "Way to go, Captain Marvel" is the guy who played Billy Batson back in the 70s.
yeah.
And I was like, "That's awesome!"
That was really great. Well, and there were several things that I enjoyed about it, and several things that I just couldn't get my head around. And one of the things that I could not get I don't want to make this whole show about this.
Yeah.
But one thing that I could not get my head around was the decision of the casting for Atlas's daughters. That was none of those casting choices made any sort of sense. Because none of them look like Greek gods at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just and the vast difference in ages didn't make sense either.
Yeah,
because they're supposed to be immortal. So how is a goddess ever going to look like Helen Mirren? No offense. Helen Mirren's a remarkable actor. She's remarkable. And even given what she had to work with in that film, possibly the best performance in the film, but
easily.
But what the hell's going on with that? I mean, the kid who plays Freddie Freeman, I also thought was pretty good. But yeah.
Why is he still in high school getting picked on by bullies? It's like 5 years later.
Well, it's supposed to be 2 years later.
It's supposed to be 2 years later, but come on. These guys look like
they're clearly nearly 30.
Yeah. All the orphans are kind of too old to be playing the roles that they're doing because they just took a year or two too long because of COVID. And it's a mess. It is an absolute mess. And it's like, okay, so you couldn't do Black Adam because The Rock screwed you over and said, "No, I want to fight Superman." It's like, don't you understand? That's why we did the Black Adam movie, is to build you up to take on Captain Marvel, and he doesn't want to fight Captain Marvel. And so they're like, okay, so we can't do that. And it's like, then why aren't you doing the Monster Society with the talking, Mr. Mind, the talking worm, and do that?
Well, and Fizz brings this up. The problem with the second Shazam is that they completely changed course for no reason. Why do they set up Mr. Mind and they completely drop it? Yes. And the thing that's so frustrating is they know that, right? In the after credit scene, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to go off and do the next part of my plan," and make this big deal about how slow worms move. And it's just like,
it's like,
well, you made the wrong movie.
Why'd you bring it back? You're teasing a movie that's never going to get made.
So they set up the Mr. Mind post credits of Sam, absolutely, and they know they made the wrong movie, and then they're reminding you that they made the wrong movie, and then they're telling you that they're never going to make the right movie, but they know they made the wrong movie.
Yeah.
And I'm so confused about why these guys are allowed to continue to make money in the world.
Why is
they're not?
Why is
these
Shazam
people,
still? Why is Captain Marvel still acting like an 11-year-old, but his alternate self is 18? It's like he's way more mature than the kid that he becomes when he becomes the other guy.
That was one of my problems with the first movie, was that like they really and this is the thing, they dipped out on the wisdom of Solomon, right? And then that's a plot point in the second movie.
Yeah.
Where he's still not using the wisdom of Solomon the whole movie. And it was like, okay, dude, that's fine. That's fine.
We can't talk about this because we can talk about it for an hour.
And I love Captain Marvel. I have not read as much as I want to, but I mean, there's so much. I did a paper for a conference on Captain Marvel a few years ago, and it was I need to, if I ever have the time, I need to go through and make my final draft of that paper, because it needs a few things to finish up. But it was one of those things.
Would you be interested in going over the Jeff Smith version?
Oh yeah, definitely. I bought it. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet. But yeah, that would actually make it. That might make a fun show.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
We ought to.
I think I have the first and the fourth one, and that one's really weird because it's completely different. It's like they are two separate people. Billy Batson and Captain Marvel are separate people.
Yeah, I liked that element.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm just saying it's different from how they were doing it,
Right.
Ever since Legends, where they really played up the fact that he's Billy Batson, he's a kid, So anyway, if we're going to do that, we should also do the Roy Thomas one. That's never been in continuity except for.
Should we just do my favorite Captain Marvel?
Oh,
that'd be fun.
I know that would be hilarious if we did that, but every person picked a different character from both Marvel and DC.
You mean make Captain Marvel?
Right. Carol Danvers.
Yeah, so like, I mean, it would open it up so that it would open it up so that like your Captain Marvel story wouldn't necessarily be DC's Captain Marvel. It could be any character called Captain Marvel.
What, 9 of them now?
Yeah, that could be really fun.
Well, before we go, I need to tell everybody that I have a special show on Labor Day.
Oh yeah, let me load up the.
Sure.
I'm going to put that in the chat, guys.
Okay.
And you guys can go ahead and click on the link and check it out. There's already a thing waiting for folks, and you can check out the promo image. Check out what Hutch has got doing on for his Labor Day stream. I don't know if you want to talk about it at all.
I think if you are you gonna. Oh, did you? Oh, yeah, there's the link. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, put the link in there. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if you're gonna. I thought you were talking about like you were gonna show it there. No, the thumbnail pretty much says it all. I'm going to have my show guest hosted by Alex Jones, and since Alex Jones is doing it appropriately, it will be about. Even though it is Zelda, we're playing Zelda. He's going to be guest hosting, and he's going to be saving all the gay frogs in Hateno Village, and running the political campaign there for the mayoral race. So should be fun. I've been working on that I've been preparing a lot of stuff for it. So that's going to be a lot of fun on Monday. And if you don't see it live, you can still watch it later. And then of course I do Among Us on Friday. That's also on the upcoming things. So thank you for letting me plug that. And Cartoonicus, do you have anything to promote?
Oh, hadn't thought about that. No, I'm not quite ready to release my comic. I'm getting really close, but I'm gonna have to skip out on that.
Here, I've got the pro image on another tab for your thing.
Oh, okay.
I was like, wait a second, I could do that. It's a fun image, so
it's fine as long as the my Photoshop skills are still very amateurish, self-taught, but I must say, as much as I don't like AI artwork, It does help sometimes. It's like, give me gay frogs. There you go. Boom.
So, okay. Well, we'll call that the show. I am really sad and sort of upset out there in the world. You may notice that we have not had an updated forces page. That's entirely my fault, and the fact of my day job taking up all of my time, and everything. And I'm still trying to get some equilibrium under me. So as soon as I can start
I gotta
posting,
admit, I was actually
forces again.
I was just reading it today for the first time in a while. I love the idea of disco fever.
Oh yeah, Disco Fever.
That was hilarious.
That's an old story, but that one's really fun. I really enjoy that one. And Tank says he's going to try to see that. We're glad. So, but yeah. So, new Forces stuff coming sometime soon. We'll be finishing up Homecoming, Ladies' Night, and at some point. Nanji like Disco Fever too. Well, I'm glad. We'll be as far as the classic stuff. We'll hopefully get back up on pursuit that too. But if you are following us on Patreon, you'll be seeing some uncolored and in process grab it stuff this weekend. But as far as the colored stuff, it is being a pain right now. So once again, my time has been taken up with other things. So I just want to make comics, man.
Don't we all?
Oh yeah. Next week, we'll be talking about something. Maybe my favorite Shazam story or Captain Marvel story. We'll see if we can get people on board with that. So, see who all can make it. But that's it for now. Until next time, get out there and read some comics. And might I say, I was going to make a suggestion. I can't remember what it was now. It skipped out of my head. Hey, Winnie the Pooh Demon Slayer is in stores now. I'm an editor. Okay, we'll see you guys next time. Right. Oh, hey, Andrew Grant says, "Fine, Joe. Good to talk to you, Andrew, and everybody." He used to be one of my bros here in town and moved away. Okay, guys, we're leaving it for the reels. Bye.